Yeah. Okay.
According to my
Cool.
site. Hey guys, it is coffee talk, that time of the week. Coffee talk with Coach K, and I've got Coach Melany over here. And instead of coffee today, I've got cacao.
I've got tea.
And Melany's got a cup of tea in Dubai. So such a crazy good topic today. Melany is a holistic holistic therapist, and tell me what kind of coach, personal
Development, self-development.
self-development coach. So Melany's been doing this for a very long time. And we are talking about her specialty today. And it seemed to come up in a lot of people today, this very topic of triggers, trauma, and wounds, and how easily we're triggered, and what does it mean, what we can do with it. So I have Melany on here to give us her juice, her wisdom. And as we're going through this, please type in the message or in the chat if you have any questions that come up, and we'll make sure that they get answered. Awesome. So, wow, emotional triggers. Melany, we've already talked about it quite a bit today. And
yeah, we have.
Everybody in the world gets triggered. So can you maybe dive into first what that really means, kind of in layman's terms, and then share a little bit of your story and how you got to where you are, and why you're doing. Start off with the triggers. What do you mean by that?
So a trigger is an emotional reaction, like a charged emotional reaction to a situation or circumstance, or or even in a relationship. So it's this emotional reaction that sometimes just takes over you, and then you react, and then sometimes afterwards you're like, why did I say that? Or why did I react like that? And you tend to feel out of control, basically. It's important to know that all triggers are top layer emotions, and they're really protecting a wound, an emotional wound that happened most likely in your childhood many years ago. So and wounds that you have suppressed over time, and the trigger is really the emotion that you use to protect the wound. So anything that sort of scratches the surface of that wound, and we have many different wounds. It depends on the situation. Anything that scratches the surface, you react, or you defend, or even a trigger could be even feeling shamed and feeling humiliated and feeling hurt. That could be a trigger as well. But what you need to understand is that the trigger itself is not the causal emotion. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people react, and when you are in this trigger and you're emotionally charged, you feel so justified in that trigger.
Oh yeah, baby.
And what you need to understand is that you're not seeing clearly. You're seeing through the filters of the wound. Mm-hmm. And you've made a story or a judgment or something, either about you or about life or whatever it is, and you're reacting to what you are perceiving. And you have to understand that if you're perceiving through the filters of the wound, you're not actually seeing clearly.
Yeah.
And that's why you're reacting. So yeah, that's what a trigger is, really. It's you defending the wound.
There's so much to get into this, but
yeah, I hope that was clear.
Before we get it, so we went to the basic, what it is, and most people know what it is, but I just wanted you to clarify. And before we get into all the other, diving deeper into that, what brought you to centralize what you do on trauma and on wounds, and to dive in deep with other people? What brought you to have that passion to go there with other people in this topic?
So basically it was through my own healing, obviously. So so I grew up in, I'm half Brazilian, half English. And in Brazil, it's very much, I grew up around mediums and psychics and going to witch doctors. And so it was very much occult, going to get your energies cleansed. My granny used to make me stand here and then cleanse my energy with plants. And then I used to go speak to psychic doctors, and then my aunt would, or a friend of my mother's would come and channel spirits. So I was immersed in this field of holistic healing and natural healing since I was young. And when I started suffering from suicidal ideation and depression and self-harm um, throughout my teens, naturally I thought in my head that was healing. So I naturally went to energy healing. I studied Reiki when I was 18, and that was what opened me up. And then I didn't know what I wanted to do at university. So then I took a gap year, and after that, I decided that I wanted to study holistic therapies. So then I studied aromatherapy and all these natural medicine, because that's what in my childhood, you go to the witch doctor, you go to the homeopath. I don't remember going to doctors or anything like that. Even when I suffered from like nightmares and things when I was younger, I was taken to see a psychic doctor, not to the doctor, and then get psychic surgery and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I spent 10 years immersing myself in these studies, NLP, hypnotherapy. I did a degree in holistic and complementary therapies, and all sorts of energy healing out there. But after some time, I noticed that I was still stuck in patterns. And this is what bothered me. And it was really my quest and my search for truth. Why are all these therapies not working? I get a little relief in the moment, but it's not breaking the pattern. And one thing that I noticed practicing Reiki for like 10 years was I noticed that the people that were healing were the people that when emotions came up, they processed them. Mm-hmm. And then I noticed I made a distinction between the people that weren't healing and that kept coming back for Reiki for their quick fix of the 3 months. They would eventually push the emotion down and they would refuse to process the emotion. Mm-hmm. And there was this distinction that said, okay, I have something here. It's emotions. It's emotions that is keeping me stuck. It's emotions that is keeping my clients stuck. And none of this energy healing, this, that, and the other is going to help until we actually access the emotion. These can be tools, but it doesn't actually break the pattern until you face the emotion and process it. And this was my big epiphany.
This is huge because in 2007, when I went on my own inner journey, I went to the Himalayas and went to Austrian Alps, and I decided to go on it's called a Vipassana meditation. So it's 10 days. I met someone that said, you got to do this. And I had always pushed myself in sport, but never to the mental side. And I wasn't really into meditation. So I said, don't just try it. Let's go all in. So I did 10 days. So we don't talk for 10 days. And they give you a meditation process, how to, like a technique to follow sensations in your body. And you end up doing it for 10 hours a day. And I remember that was kind of in the middle of my 6-month journey. And I remember doing it and going through day 3, day 4, oh my God, and all the emotions coming up, because you can't talk to people. You can't write, you can't listen. So everything's right there.
Wow.
Your usual modalities to deal, music, dancing, talking to people, none of it's there. So I remember feeling days of extreme fears. But the thing is, I did 3 of those 10 days in a row, like with little space. And I still was more lost than here I was with all this hours of meditation. And I was actually felt more fearful, if I'm being honest, and I look back after. And I think it's because I didn't know how. I could do the meditation technique and I could see it was there, but I didn't know how to deal with the emotion.
Right.
The emotion was throwing me right off. And when it would come, I thought the meditation would help me take the emotion away.
Yes.
And, but I was afraid of the fear. right? And I could tame it for a bit, but I learned later on, you have to give the emotion space,
Yeah,
right? And meditation did a lot, but it didn't, the phase I was in going through it, it didn't help me to deal with what it was in the moment. So I don't know what happened, but I was more lost coming out. And it's still part of the journey. It wasn't negative. But now what we were talking about today earlier, and how it's like opportunity to give the emotion space. And, I think people can just freak out when the emotion comes. Like,
totally. And I think it's because we're not, I wasn't taught by my parents to process emotions. And in fact, most of us were taught to shut down our emotions. We were taught, big boys don't cry, big girls don't cry, or, you're not allowed to be angry because it's ugly, and then we're judged for having these emotions such as anger or whatever. Um, yeah, we're not taught. And we're not
if
taught in
I show
school.
fear, people will not like that. So
Yeah.
that's the automatic, right? No one will
So
want to be around you. That's the automatic.
yeah, exactly. So then what we do, we suppress it and we repress it. And then obviously this turns into triggers and situations and things that we have to heal much later on in life. I mean, I know now that people are starting to educate, little kids and dealing with their emotions and stuff, which I think is great. But in our time, like we didn't have any of that.
Totally.
So yeah, so I think that's why most people freak out. They don't know what to do with it. And a lot of people that were emotionally abused, this was my case, and even physically abused, which was my case as well. um, uh, there's a lot of fear initially in feeling the emotion, because if I were like when I was being beaten and then I would cry, I would be beaten even more. I wasn't allowed to cry, so it was injustice upon injustice. So I had terror basically and fear about feeling the emotion. And this is another emotion that you're going to have to process. You have to process the fear first before accessing the causal. This has been my
Yeah.
processing journey.
Mhm.
I don't know if that made sense.
It's always under,
Yeah, so there was fear before even accessing it because I wasn't allowed to feel.
yeah.
And then obviously the deep down, there's always grief. Like what I found on my journey, and I'm sure you found this as well, like deep down, beyond the triggers and beyond the layers, is grief. Is grief of not feeling loved, really, in
Mm.
that moment. Because in that moment, love was withdrawn, and yeah, you were either shamed or punished or
Yeah.
whatever it was. And sorry, those emotions of shame and all that, this is what gets triggered later on.
So we can think like certain things are healed, and then you come across, you're in a relationship, or um, you meet another person, they say one little thing, and then you're off. And
And
even
you're
sometimes
mad.
when you think that part has been healed. Now, would that mean that then part of it isn't healed?
Correct, yeah. I see, like if you have a trigger, like an emotional trigger, then you have an emotional wound to deal with. And what I have found on my journey, when you really heal at the causal level, that situation, firstly, it can happen again and it won't trigger you at all. And even if the person is projecting certain emotions at you, you will actually feel it bounce off you. It won't affect you in any way. You actually have compassion for that
Yeah.
person or situation. But also, once you really heal something at the causal level, you won't even attract that situation anymore. That's the interesting
Powerful
part.
stuff.
Yeah.
Melanie, can you give us an example of, I mean, yeah, you can use your own life again, or an example of a typical situation, perhaps of a client, not a specific client, but where people come to you and to heal these certain things. What would be a typical trigger, and how could you address someone to deal with it in the moment if they're on their own?
It's a tough one if you're on your own. I think it's really hard if you're just beginning your journey. I would say get help. After a while, once you've been on this journey and you've learned how to use these tools and really understand the process, then you can pretty much do it by yourself a lot of the times. But if it's the beginning, I would highly recommend you get help. Hire a coach or someone that has been through what you're struggling with. But first thing is, obviously you need to be aware what your triggers are. Maybe write down all of your triggers. Breathing, slowing down your breath, journaling. These are just some tools that you can start to use. And like we talked about earlier today, like give yourself some space, especially if it involves another person. Just ask for space and say, I'm really triggered right now, which is what I am. I'm so triggered right now. I need time to sit with this, feel this, and then we can talk about this, in an hour or tomorrow or in a few days, but just let me sit with it. But for example, I mean, you can be triggered by someone not listening to you.
Yeah.
That's a classic in relationships. You can be triggered by someone not respecting you and not respecting your boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
You can be triggered by rejection.
Yeah.
One thing that I posted a video a long time ago about entitled hurt. And this is when one of our needs was not met. And you can be triggered by someone not meeting your needs. Yeah. But that is not actually a wound. That's more of it's an unloving, like it's an entitled hurt. I don't know if I described that right. Like, for example,
expectation hurt, like an expectation.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. So it's not, I just wanted to say that it may not necessarily be a big wound. Like there are triggers that are associated with big wounds and that you need to process, but other times there are things that are not necessarily a big wound. They're just, expectations and rules that we've set up for ourselves that are actually not very loving. Or we want our needs met from somebody else that are actually, not very loving.
Yeah, what you said about when it's a trigger of trauma or a wound, then definitely get help, because that has a big charge behind it, right?
Yeah.
But if you're somewhat along on your journey and you're somewhat aware and these things keep coming up, then there are definite ways, like we all get triggered, even people like you who help people.
Oh yeah, totally.
But
I get triggered by my dog sometimes.
How the heck do you get triggered by your dog? But
when he goes after cats, that's where I get triggered. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we can just be in a lower moment, and then old wounds that I found or patterns that I practiced in the past can come out and bite you.
Yeah.
And if you're aware, then you can not sit in it that long, that I find. And then you can use tools like writing or EFT or these other tools. If you've already practiced it, you can go into it. That's the thing, is you have to start somewhere. And if it's new, if you don't know how to deal with it, then definitely help, right? Because I think some people don't even realize they're in a trigger. They, like you said, they feel justified. Like, this is my world.
Yeah. They feel so justified. They can't see anything else.
Yeah.
And they really believe they are right. And they're believing the wound.
The emotion comes back. Like if there's a certain thing that triggers me, and it brings me back to when I was 14, like a shy girl trying to fit in. If something in my life now at 49 is similar to that, a similar situation of fitting in, because there's going to be I want a sense of belonging here. If something doesn't go right in there and I'm off, I can get that same emotion.
Yeah.
14 can loosen up again. And now I know I work with it as an opportunity to shift it and talk to my coach. And you know what I mean?
100%. And you said something right there. It's the same emotion. You're just repeating the pattern again and again and again until you learn the lesson, until you say, oh, actually, this is in me. I'm attracting this. This trigger is an unloving thing within me. It's a wound. It's something that I need to heal. It's not out there.
Yeah.
I need to do the work in here. And you'll just keep repeating that until you own the trigger. And what I have found, like on my journey, is that the trigger, like I said in the beginning, is not the causal emotion. It's what you use to defend the wound. And very often it starts to become addictions. It starts to become emotional addictions. Yeah. And you process it differently from the wound. So in processing triggers, you have to have humility. You have to have desire to own. And this is really hard when you're, especially when if you're angry, because you feel so justified in your reasons and whatever, your justifications.
Yeah.
So it requires a lot of will and humility to own that, like, actually, this is my anger.
Yeah.
This is not about the situation. Let's forget about the situation for now. Just focus on feeling and owning this anger. And if you just do that, it can just take a few seconds for you to own the anger and process and actually access the deeper layer emotions. Yeah.
And in processing those deeper layers, it can be it's a personal thing, how we deal with them, writing or sharing it with someone.
However, yes, you can do that to support the processing, but the real processing is feeling.
Yeah. Just being with it.
You have to feel it inside of your body and like be with it and be present, not making it a story, not trying to understand it in your head, because a lot of people try to understand the emotion before they actually feel it. And to me, this is an indication that you actually don't want to feel it.
Yeah.
You're just trying to work it out in your head because it's too painful to feel it in your heart and your body and feel that grief or the fear or whatever it is that you're processing.
We're very quick to label it and figure it out. And why do I have this? And wrestle it to the ground. And that's the wrong energy to go around with it.
Yeah. And emotions, the emotional realm and the mind and the intellect are two different realms.
Yeah.
Like you cannot process an emotion in your head. It's just impossible. You have to feel it. And very often what I have found is when I've tried to do it in my head, after I've processed the emotion, it was actually about something completely different than what I originally thought. Yeah.
I agree, because whenever I've had any sessions with anyone or a healing session, I come to the space with a certain subject, right? With a certain, well, this is what I'm looking at now. And the person across from me, who is guiding me, comes up with something different. And she'll say, I don't know where this is going, but follow me here. And it almost always is nothing to do with what I said.
Yeah.
It's because there's something else going on. That was just my entry. That was just like my door in. I'm dealing with this stuff. Right? Let's look at this, but actually something else. Well, do you remember back with your grandma and like stuff that you would never expect? It's very
It's very interesting. But I will say, like, going back to what we were talking about before, like sometimes you can process triggers and change patterns very quickly. I just want to share that. It doesn't have to be something big. It just, like I said, it really depends on the trigger. I'll just want to share a quick example.
Yes,
I posted about this and on my YouTube, but it's basically I was getting triggered. I was repeating this pattern of I was getting road rage basically. And I was getting triggered by people tailgating me.
That's what. Oh, I'm with you, sister.
So this pattern was getting worse, and I was really like enraged because this is my life. This is people's life, like you have to respect me, was my like justification and all of that. So, and one of my heart prayers and intentions, I set this intention to heal this trigger. I said it's time, basically. And it happened while I was actually driving like 120 kilometers an hour. And this lady, I could see her just coming from miles away, like completely tailgating me and flashing. But in the moment, I almost went into that, but I remembered my intention. So I used my will. I said, no, I attracted this because I'm being triggered again, to face it. Obviously, I don't recommend, please don't try this at home. I'm very, I was driving very fast and all of this. And in the moment, I fully owned the anger. And then I went into fear, and I was really in fear. And then once I really owned the fear and I didn't move, by the way, because she was bullying me out the way. And I said, no, this is my law of attraction. I need to face this fear. And so I faced it. And then took minutes. I managed to access the grief, and I was crying while driving. This all happened in 5 minutes. And then within a few moments, instantly, she backed off. And she was just driving with me like that. And that to me just confirmed my belief in like healing these emotional wounds, and really how your law of attraction can change immediately when you heal the wound at the causal level. And it hasn't happened since, and it's been over a year. It's been a year and a half or something now.
Huge.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing when there's someone you don't want to face, or a person that triggers you, or that's always irritating. They constantly show up in your life.
Yeah.
It's like, what the hell? And then that's another a lighter version sort of what you're talking about. But if we start with those type of things, right, and showing the law of attraction, how we can affect our life just by going to the
owning,
start to change the bigger things, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
That's massive.
Yeah, it was huge. But I just wanted to share that because it only took 5 minutes.
Yeah.
It wasn't this long process. But obviously there are other wounds that can take a little bit longer to work through.
It took 5 minutes, but a strong desire.
Yes. Yeah, and will.
Because in road rage, there's a lot of emotion going on in there. To interrupt that and say, okay.
No, I really wanted it. I really wanted to. I set a strong desire before.
And I believe that's huge.
Yeah.
Huge. Well, my dear, I don't want to have to close this off, but hey, if anyone
this is awesome.
Has any burning questions, please drop a question here before we sign off. But anyhow, I'm going to get a question ready for Melany. I have my magic cards, as my Lily is barking in the background. She never barks. That's so funny. She's triggered now.
Yeah.
Lily's triggered.
Funny, mine two normally bark, but they're quiet today.
She never barks. It's so funny. Pick a number, please, between number 1 and 12.
3.
Okay. Here's a question for you to finish off. A total non-serious question. What is the most important decision you have ever made?
Oh. Wow, that's a tough one. I'm just going to say what comes to my head.
Yes, please.
So I was living in Brazil at the time. I was just after uni, and I was going down the wrong path, basically. A lot of drug abuse, basically, and I knew in my heart that it was going to end badly if I stayed. And I was contemplating this. I was on my own, and looking out the kitchen window. It was nighttime, and I still remember this. It was nighttime, and I made the decision to leave and to come back to Dubai. because I knew obviously drugs are not, available here as they readily are, in Brazil. And I made a decision to not to choose a different path, basically. And I haven't looked back. It was such a strong decision, and within 2 weeks I packed up everything and I left and went cold turkey and all of that. Yeah.
Wow. What'd you say? Cold turkey.
Cold turkey, yeah, with all the drug use that I was doing at the time. But I was aware, so it was a moment of awareness, like this is not the right path. Like this is not going to end well.
It just takes a moment, right? Just takes a moment.
Took a moment, and I made the decision, packed up. In 2 weeks I was back in Dubai. Yeah.
Thank God, sister, you did that.
Yeah.
Those moments of decision are massive.
Yeah.
Well, my dear, you are a wealth of knowledge. And again, if any questions for Mel, please write them below and we'll get them answered later. And I can also have Mel back on for sure. We can go
awesome.
deeper into this. This was juicy, packed, an important topic as it happens daily. I mean, it's happening now as we speak. People are massively triggered and reacting.
Yeah.
And so super important topic. So you can never bring it up enough. So thank you for your presence. Thank you for your power.
Thank you.
For your sisterhood and helping so many people. And yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Take it off. We sign off. Take it off as we sign off.
I love it.
Love you, girl.
Love you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Have a great day.